My husband and I are fortunate enough that our financial situation allows me now to stay home, and he's going to take over working, so we can kind of switch roles. But that was a huge thing, I think, in determining that, is I feel like I've missed out on the past 7 years.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Reesa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Hey everyone, so my guest today is a very special one because she is my lovely sister-in-law. So Jen is joining us today. Jen, thank you so much for being willing to be a guest on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you and also to hear about this really yummy recipe. Before we do that, for anybody who doesn't know you like I know you, which has been for 15 plus years now. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah. So my name is Jen.
Mm-hmm.
My brother is your husband.
Yes.
I have a husband of my own, 2 wonderful children, 7 and 4, almost 5. And yeah, I'm a full-time working mom as of up until last Friday.
Okay.
So that's been my life so far. Now that I'm not working full-time, we're focusing on my husband's 2 businesses that relate around veterans and their disability claims. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to hear about and chat about your experience as a full-time working mom, because that in itself is a huge thing. Very, very challenging. We got 2 things going on there. But first, can you tell me what recipe we're going to do today and why did you choose this one?
So selfishly, lemon is like my favorite flavor.
Okay.
So lemon bars has always been something that I really enjoy eating, and making is super simple. And then I found this recipe that I've actually never made before.
Okay.
But it incorporates cream cheese, which is also another favorite dessert of mine. So
wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
How I picked it.
So tell me what couple steps I need to do I can get going while we chat.
So I think this is the crust, right?
Yes.
So we put the crust in the pan,
Okay.
flatten it down, and then we have to bake that just until it's toasted, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. And then are we mixing everything else up?
Yep, and then the rest, I believe, is the filling.
Yep. Wonderful. And so in here, I kind of pre-did our crust, which is our flour, sugar, and butter. Yeah. So, and as always, the recipe will be linked down below, so make sure you check that out if this is something that resonates with you. So tell me a little bit, I'd love to hear kind of your journey with that decision as far as you being kind of the full-time working parent, and what's been your experience in that world?
Yeah, so when my husband and I got married, we were both working. We got married, we decided to have kids. It all happened pretty fast, and it was kind of always our goal when we had talked before having kids that maybe one of us would get to stay home with them if able. And it just so happened, and because daycare is so expensive that and for as far as the family dynamic, we just really liked the feeling of like raising our own children. That was important to us.
Okay.
And it just kind of worked out that way that I was the working parent. My husband stayed home.
Okay.
Because I made more money at the time. And he hadn't finished his bachelor's degree. Okay. So the original plan was that I was going to work up until he finished his degree, because he is a veteran. So he gets the GI Bill to finish school. So that was kind of helpful in a way to supplement an income.
Yeah.
And so that was our original plan, was that he would stay home until he finished school. And then he wanted to do something in the police force or something like that in the service sector.
Yeah. Okay.
That then I would stay home and he would go to work, which it just never really happened that way.
Okay. Which I feel like that's been the theme I'm hearing so much from parents. Like we go in right with this, like, this is my plan and it looks so nice and it sounds so good.
It's perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
And then, life happens, kids happen, and it doesn't necessarily always look that way.
Right.
And so I'm curious for you kind of, with that said, you had mentioned kind of at the beginning that it was really important to you folks that you were participating in raising your kids. Can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit more about why was that such a big piece, a big component for the two of you?
I think a lot of the couples that we had as mentors or like just other friends we had that had kids,
Okay.
that was kind of a common thing, was that they had kids 6 weeks later, however long maternity they got, then kids went to daycare. And it was just kind of like a common thing where
Mhm.
everybody would go their separate ways, you know, get up in the morning, go to daycare, go to work, and then come home, have those few hours together. And we just wanted more, I guess.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right, because especially with things nowadays and the way that they work, oftentimes for many, they have to have kind of everyone working in order to be able to survive.
Mhm.
And so, you know, like you said, that becomes many people's routines of getting up, going to work, going to daycare, going to school, whatever that looks like, coming back, doing like the late night stuff, the homework, the whatever, and getting up and doing it
Yeah.
all over again.
Yeah.
So for you, it sounds like kind of because the nature of everything and the fact that you were able to kind of get a position that was kind of higher income at that time, was
Mhm.
that difficult with, I feel like, and let me know if this is not something that resonates for you. I feel like I've heard from so many folks that whether it's familial pressure or societal pressure, that there's this idea of moms and being kind of in the home, homemaker, staying home and raising the kids. Like, was that a message you had received? Was that something that made it challenging to kind of go back to work?
It was.
Okay.
But then on the flip side of that coin, I feel like too, where everybody is also pressured that you're supposed to have this career. You're supposed to find something, this meaningful something that you're passionate about, and then work your way up the corporate ladder until, you know, you reach your goals or whatever they may be. You break the ceiling, whatever. And so on the one half, I really liked that my husband got to stay home with the kids because then one of us was.
Yeah.
But then on the other half, I was like looking for this unobtainable feeling of that, like I had accomplished something in life. More
In the work
than,
side?
yes. So
Gotcha.
more than like the family. Because I feel like at a young age, even in high school, like you're supposed to figure out what you want to do with your life.
Yeah.
And like, so that's what I was like, I'm on this track and I'm like working my way up, and the field was quality engineering and manufacturing. So I mean, like there's ways to go, but like I was working my way up, and that's, so after maternity leave was up, I was like, I need to get back out there. You know, I need to keep working and move my way up and
was it
provide
an
for
I
my
need,
family.
like that was the narrative?
Yeah.
I need to do this?
Yeah.
Did that sounds really like a heavy pressure to kind of be carrying.
Oh my gosh, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because of course we didn't stay where we were living when we had children, we moved.
Yeah.
So then like financials are always in the back of your mind. And then one income, it's always difficult. And yeah, it was a lot of pressure.
Did you see that show up in different ways and kind of day to day, or your interactions or your mindset?
Yeah. And looking back now, of course, it's so easy to see, but like, I kind of felt like your typical dad in most like TV show roles. The dad is the one that goes to work, comes home, and is like grumpy with their kids, or is like the, I worked all day, I deserve a break kind of a thing.
Okay.
Like I started to see myself feeling that way.
Wow.
Like I needed my me time. And that was always like before work, because if I came home and expected to have me time when I got home, I never would get it because I was gone all day. So I would end up having to get up really early to have my me time, to spend all day working, and then come home. And I was just like grumpy all the time.
Yeah. Did that make it hard to connect with the kids or even your partner?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Because Ty was a stay-at-home dad, I expected a lot of things to be done when I came home. Like I was spending all day at work away from everybody. I thought I should be able to come home and have a clean house or have fed children, or, you know, just like all of these things should be done by the time I get home.
Yeah.
So that I don't have to do them.
Because you're tired. You've been at work all day.
Yeah.
Bringing home bacon.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is completely unfair. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Well, I think that's the difficulty, right? That's that saying, right? The grass is always greener. You're on this side, and I feel like you hear the opposite from the stay-at-home parents, where they're like, "Oh, you get to go away and be with grown-ups, and I'm
having
with kids.
Conversations with people."
Exactly. And so you have the life, and then vice versa. The ones that are going to work are like, well, you get to stay home, and yeah, why can't we do all the cooking and the cleaning? You're home all day. Like, what else? And so there's, like you said, each side of the coin kind of has its own unique challenges that sometimes when you're in it, it can be really difficult to see that other perspective, because we're human, and we're very much kind of, well, this is my narrative. This is my perspective. So that's kind of what I know. So that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Okay. So can I put them in?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So while that's cooking, I'm mixing this stuff up then.
Yes.
So no, my sugar. Okay. And then the sugar and
cream cheese.
Perfect. Okay. So, as this was happening, I'm curious then, was there also, because I hear you mentioning kind of that there's that layer to that expectation, kind of superhero, do it all. And like you said, kind of climb that corporate ladder. Was there any points where you were struggling? I feel like I hear from working parents kind of this parent guilt, if you will, of not necessarily being home, maybe missing some of the milestones that are happening. Was that something that was part of your journey and your narrative?
Oh, for sure. That's ultimately why I've decided to quit working. Really? I mean, my husband and I are fortunate enough that our financial situation allows me now to stay home, and he's going to take over working, so we can kind of switch roles. But that was a huge thing, I think, in determining that, is I feel like I've missed out on the past 7 years, honestly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really, really difficult, really sad.
Yeah.
To kind of be in that state of feeling like you've missed out on so much of this human that, you spent so much time kind of creating and nurturing in womb. And then to kind of pop them out and say, okay,
here,
bye, I'm going to work.
I'll see you later.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it too, is on the one side, you have I'm supposed to excel in a career. And then when I come home, I'm supposed to excel at being a mom.
Okay.
And the whole thing was just exhausting. Like, how do I all day work with people, work with things and processes, and then come home and do it all over again?
Yeah.
Even though there are these people that I love and that I want more than anything to be with, I have no energy or like headspace left when I come home.
Yeah.
And have those 4 hours before they go to bed. And yeah, it was exhausting.
Yeah. And then, and I heard you mention kind of that then frustration on top of it, because it sounds like at that point you're then at your capacity, kind of expended all this energy at work, kind of managing all these things and responsibilities to then come home. I imagine, especially kiddos, I feel like at the end of the day, they're always not, they're not always their best selves either.
Right.
So you're kind of getting
leftovers of me and of them. And yeah.
How has that been? Because I heard you mention, yes, that's gone into your decision now. Was that, did you find that was ever kind of taking a mental toll on you? And kind of throughout these last 7 years? Or did it take 7 years to kind of build up?
I don't know if it took the full 7 years, but I would say that it's taken quite a while. Because when we first had children and my husband had been staying home for a few years, I remember giving him so many props. Like, I could never be the stay-at-home parent. Like, you are doing amazing. Like, you're built for this. I could never do it.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I don't know if it's because of the time we lived in an area that was really remote, that we didn't know a lot of people and there weren't many people around. We were in the country, so we didn't have that sense of community.
Okay.
That I think that was also really hard for him too. And then COVID hit, and so everybody was even more isolated.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That I think that was a big part of like maybe the feeling like I can't do this because I couldn't do it on my own kind of a feeling. But Yeah, I remember thinking that, and then as the years have gone on, I think the regret or feeling like the missing out on things has led to thinking like, well, maybe I could have done it or should have done it. I don't know. Yeah.
Do you think it is more of a should have done it?
I think in our personal situations, the way it worked out is the way that it should have worked out.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, maybe in a different life if things were different or.
Yeah, and absolutely there, we've got reality at the same time, as we said before, that sometimes there are those built-in kind of narratives that we're trying to align with that. And so that's why I was super curious when you said the word, maybe I should have done, like, is that kind of the narrative that you feel was set out for you of like, this is what I should have done?
Maybe.
Yeah. And that makes it difficult to kind of try to fit yourself into something that's maybe designed by somebody else.
Yeah. And I'm a huge firm believer in everything happens for a reason. Yeah. So I think that maybe not I should have in this life, but I don't know, maybe earlier than 7 years, maybe we could have done something different before these 7 years, but
yeah. And like you said, sometimes if, in your situation, it sounds like the best opportunity for your family to kind of have one of you to stay home and, being able to make enough to realistically survive with a 4-person family in the United States, that it did kind of mean, hey, you're our best bet right now for you to go out and do
provide.
the job. And provide.
Yeah.
Were there times that you were able to kind of find a community to support you? I know you mentioned kind of some of that isolation. Is that something that helped alleviate some of, the struggles? I mean, what was your experience?
I would definitely say the community is ultimately what's changed our situation. I mean, we lived pretty far from even like family, so that we didn't have the grandparents that could drop anything to come watch our kids, and we didn't have close enough friends that we could ask to babysit or anything like that. So really it was just me, my husband, and our kids. So we didn't even get to go on dates really or anything, because it was always like we had guilt that we needed to spend time with our children, or we didn't feel comfortable giving them to somebody else to hold on to while we would snuck out for an hour or whatever,
Yeah.
So I think we've recently moved the past couple of years and found a community that we feel has really like helped us to give our kids the best life, but then my husband and I have been able to reconnect to provide our best selves for our kids.
You mentioned this idea of kind of the guilt of even like going out on a date. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think personally for me, my husband probably say different, but
we all have our own perspectives.
Yes. But being gone all day, then I would feel guilt for like not seeing them in the evenings. Or if like another friend was like, hey, let's have a girls' weekend, I'd be like, no, I can't. This is my time with my kids, So like maybe mom guilt, but maybe just guilt in general, that like I was already missing so much that I didn't want to miss my weekends either.
Yeah. Did you find that was often the case, that you're kind of almost sacrificing? Because I heard you mention, like, if I wanted any kind of me time, it had to be in the morning. Like, if that didn't happen, were you able to kind of say, I still need to find an outlet? Or was it just, if I didn't, get up in the morning, which that can be difficult in itself to try to get up when you're tired, exhausted.
Yep.
Was that the case for you, where it was either I do it in the morning so I'm not, quote unquote, impeding on my time with them?
Yeah. And a head case later, if I don't get my me time. Yeah.
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 And then I heard you mention kind of reconnect with your partner. Do you feel like because of that and that isolation, and that it was this, okay, well, now this is the kid time, there's really not time for us, did that end up being difficult on the relationship?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't ever so bad as like we were looking for outlets elsewhere. We always stayed a consistent partnership, but I think it definitely led to arguments and maybe some dissonance in the things that we were looking for in each other or from each other.
Yeah. And I imagine that, again, like you said, it's such a hard balancing act to, because now you've got, first it's just you when you're by yourself and, you're like, okay, I can definitely pour into myself so much. And then you kind of figure out your way splitting it with someone else in your life. And now you've just doubled the size of the people that you're pouring into.
And they're really needy.
Yes.
These little ones.
Right? I mean, come on, figure it out, kids. So sounds like we're ready to go with our crust. Is that okay?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So now that you have the community, like how did you get over that hump of saying, hey, yes, I'm at work? Because I mean, you moved, it wasn't that whole 7 years kind of in that remote place.
5.
Correct. Okay. So within the last couple of years, has there been like an aha moment for you that you were able to kind of maybe give yourself permission to get a sitter, to go out and to be able to reconnect?
I don't know if it was really like one moment. I think it was kind of something that had been building for a while.
Okay.
And then in our new neighborhood that we've, made a community with, that there were some younger girls that were more able and willing and wanting to babysit and like hang out with our kids.
Okay.
That we would see them at like neighborhood gatherings or functions and see them interacting with our kids, that we were like, they like these girls and we trust them, that we felt comfortable enough to like leave them with them for a few hours and that kind of thing, which a little bit at a time is kind of built into more, the kids are ready for some separation as well, I guess.
Yeah. And so it sounds like from that, seeing maybe their comfort with other people and at the same time you seeing like there are people that are saying, hey, I don't mind doing this. That it
or I
was kind
want to.
Okay.
Where like before it was like, kind of trying to feel people out.
Yeah.
Do you like babysitting? Do you want to babysit? And then you're like, well, do I trust them? Even if they're willing, or it was more of a mutual thing, I think.
Do you think there was a fear of like a burdening or inconveniencing others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Like both of my parents and my husband's parents were still working up until recently too. So like you'd always feel guilty, like, hey, you want to, take a drive and come hang out with our kids for the weekend or whatever. And then, they'd say no, and then you'd feel bad for asking or,
Yeah. I imagine that's then difficult because asking, I feel like that's another thing, I talk with so many parents, kind of that idea of asking for that help or that support can be really difficult. And then there's the reality of, is it something that's realistic for them? And sometimes they do say no.
Yeah.
And so,
which is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But
absolutely. And I think that's the hard line. And did you find that it did have you kind of pull back and go, oh boy, I guess this is just what it is, and well, this is life.
Yeah. And we would always remind ourselves that like we decided to have kids, nobody else did. So ultimately it's our burden, but not a burden.
Yeah.
But our undertaking,
At the same time, it can be, you can still like, I feel like it's okay to be like, why did I make this decision? Remind me again. Why did we decide to have kids? Because I feel like that's another thing that, so many of us parents at some point, again, real talk here, I feel like if every parent were to really get honest with themselves and get honest with the world, that there are times where you do kind of, was this, let's talk about this decision that we made.
Yeah. What would life be like if we decided something different? Or
yeah, absolutely. With that said, I'm really curious, kind of some of your experience with kind of outside messages as you're in these roles. Like, do you feel like you've got comments or judgments, unsolicited, anything unsolicited pretty
Mm.
much about the decision that you made and the fact that you weren't in the home and doing some of the mothering stuff?
Honestly, I feel like I came out better on the deal than my husband did on
Okay.
what we did. A lot of times I feel like people at work would be like empathetic towards if I were like, say, upset for missing something or like had to leave early for something. I feel like I was met with a lot more compliance or like, good for you, you're gonna go, you know, see your kids or whatever. Then like my husband at home got a lot of the like, well, at least he's trying, you know, like they were like,
What do you mean? At least he's trying.
like if a lot of the at-home responsibilities would fall onto him to like get the kids ready for school or whatever, and say he forgot to turn something in or send something back to the kids, I feel like he would get a lot of the like, well, he's the dad, you know, like they would give him more grace maybe than if like it were me,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know. So I feel like he kind of drew the short end of the stick being at home and people seeing that more as like not his role.
Okay.
Where like a working mom is maybe more accepted in a workplace because a lot of moms do have to work. I don't know. The last place I worked was really, really good at if you need to leave early for your kids' stuff or whatever, you know, make sure you just let me know and make time for it. But then like you're expected to make up time elsewhere. And it's like really nice on the one hand that they're really like lenient with work hours, but like you're still expected to work your, which don't get me wrong, it's a workplace, they should expect you to work your 40 hours if they're going to pay you. But it's like there's so many hours in a day, you know?
Yeah.
I don't
know. And so it sounds like kind of almost this idea that if, you know, if he forgets, like you said, something getting ready for school, that it is kind of the, you know, oh, well, you know, so great for him to step up. He's trying versus, you know, potentially if you were there, it'd kind of be an expectation that all this stuff would be taken care of. And then, like you said, this almost this kind of compassionate understanding maybe that, oh yeah, you're a mom. Of course you have things that, you know, are maybe going to take your time. That makes a ton of sense. Is that?
Or your kids are sick, of course you should go home to be with them. Or I don't know. I felt it wasn't really the workplace pushing me out of working. It was my own and my husband's own intuitions with each other of like wanting to stay home. But so like overall, I think the places I've worked have been really good.
Okay.
I haven't had a whole lot of like, no, you have to be here kind of a thing. But it's still not easy for sure.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of, there wasn't necessarily then, thankfully, the kind of the judgments that you were any kind of less than for the fact that you weren't at home and doing these. It was more kind of the.
I think it wasn't an external thing. It was more of an internal thing.
Like sense. For yourself? Gotcha.
Like I personally feel like I've missed out on so much. It wasn't as much an external you're feeling as a parent from other people. It was more just me.
Yeah. And I think that's such a relief that wasn't something that you experienced. You know, I think so many times you hear about other people kind of really inserting themselves into other people's lives, especially when it comes to parenting. I feel like everybody's a parenting expert.
Oh, for sure.
And they want to tell you about it. And it's not always, and again, maybe it's coming from a really well-intentioned place, but, you know, maybe not the most helpful in the moment. And so kind of being able to not hear that, I think it sounds like maybe helping to challenge that narrative that you had that was, it sounds like was really strong for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were some of the things that, looking back on this process, and your experience, that you feel you've kind of walked away, or, you know, if, again, what I've been saying to folks, like if you had access to a DeLorean and you could go back and tell yourself something, or maybe speak to those that are in a similar situation where they are kind of that female identified, mother that maybe has to go back to work, and kind of what words would you offer?
That's really difficult. I don't know.
Or would you tell yourself anything to like be prepared for it a little bit better, or maybe to, give yourself a little bit more compassion and grace? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that would be a good start for sure. And maybe just kind of like a supportive hang in there,
Okay. Hang in there because
everything is going to work out.
Mm.
The beginning years, I feel like, are the hardest when they need you the most.
Yeah.
And so as they get older, it gets easier, to take time for yourself. So yeah, I think the advice would be to hang in there,
Yeah. Kind of this too shall pass.
Yes.
Do you feel
and it goes by faster than you think?
Yeah. Those milestones come up real quick. Absolutely. Do you think that there is a part of you that does battle with some of that regret for those younger years, like you said, when maybe they really need you, as you mentioned?
Yeah.
How do you battle that?
Making up for it now.
In what ways?
To be there for them more. I feel like communicating with them more and just connecting, making more of a connection with them.
What does that, I'm so curious because you mentioned connection, and it sounds like you're very kind of intentionally doing these things to make connection, which I think is highly valuable. I don't know how much of that is from generations past. We're kind of in their forefront, of their mind. And so I'm so curious, like, what are the ways that for you've found this for me, like, how do you make those connections? How do you kind of pour into their cup?
And a generic example would be like when they ask you purposefully, will you play with me? And I'm always like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go play, even if I'm busy or whatever. And then we sit down, and 5 minutes later, I find myself wandering away because I just can't do like the imaginary back and forth anymore. It's so difficult. And then, you fail at it a few times. So then they just tell you, well, have your person say this. And they like have the conversation for you. And so that only lasts a little while. And then I'd find myself like, well, I have to go start laundry or like whatever. And I'd always have an excuse to get up and go walk away from the interaction. So I've been trying really hard lately to just spend more time.
Yeah.
And do those games that I know I'm not good at, but that they want you to do, spend more of the time that they ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a beautiful point because so many times those bids for connection from our kiddos show up in all these different ways that we may miss them and not necessarily pick them up as a bid for connection. Like you said, hey, can you come play with me? Which in, adult speak, that might be, hey, let's have a girls' night out. That one I feel like we're ready to receive, but like, come play with me. We're like, oh, I've got laundry to do. I've got a pile of dishes, and so it does make it really difficult.
Or you sit down on the ground and you're like, oh gosh, I need to vacuum.
Like, oh, this house is dirty.
Yep. Now that I'm here, I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so, being able to kind of pick up some of those things that
can wait, all the rest of it can wait.
Has that been a difficult one to say things like the dirt on the floor can wait?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because it was such an easy excuse,
Yeah. Well, and, depending, there are some folks that I feel like some of that dirt can, for others, produce some anxieties. There's that whole idea of the clutter in your house and the clutter in your brain and all that is very real. And so it can be such a battle to say, yes, my anxiety might be higher in this moment. I am kind of choosing to say, hey, I'm going to pick up this bid for connection. And sometimes we always can't.
Right.
Just like with our girlfriends or, you know, whatnot. And we do have to say no sometimes. But to be able to, like you said, find those little ways that we can say, you know what, today I can, or right now I can. I think it's huge.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I think the hard one for me is still remembering that some of their bids for connection can also be the tantrums.
Yeah.
Because those ones are a little bit harder to go,
yeah,
oh my goodness, you know, that's still them needing us versus the just, come on, dude, like, stop.
Pull yourself together.
Yeah. Act like a grown-up. So many times.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I had another parent chat about just that, where, you know, sometimes it is hard to remember that they are kids. And again, that's just another way that for them, it's an opportunity to connect.
Yeah.
Versus being able to just say, hey, let's move on for the sake of moving on because it's not convenient for us right now. So that's really cool. Do you feel like you've seen, I know it's, you know, kind of very new in your some of that shift and kind of that intentionality. Do you feel like you've noticed a difference for yourself, for your relationship with your partner, or for your kids? Like, what have you seen?
My husband and I are reconnecting, which is nice. We've been telling everybody that we've been able to date again.
Okay.
I mean, it's been 10 years, so
yeah.
I feel like I've read that somewhere. Like every 10 years, you kind of come back around or whatever. So maybe this is coming back around.
I trust you.
They say, right? I don't know who they are, but so definitely that. And then I feel like because of that, I'm overall like happier, that I'm a better mom to the kids too. That they see a happy mom whose cup is full that can then pour into them a little more too.
Yeah.
So, and then I think too, the not being so intentional with like work driven things, I have more drive in the things we do at home too.
Can you say more about that? Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like having been at work all day, your brain is full of all the problems or like whatever you have at work, that by the time you get home, you don't have the energy or the brain capacity to like push on things at home. So like Everett, my 4-year-old, the first semester of school or whatever they divvy it up into, the teacher, we had a parent teacher conference and she was like, well, he's a little behind in like some of these areas. And instead of then like having the drive when I got home to work with him and spend extra time with him, I was just like, well, he'll figure it out, you know, or like we'd try for a little while and then I'd just, you know, again, find something to clean or dinner to make or what have you. So I feel like now not having the drive at work, I have more of a drive to with the kids and other things at home, you know.
And do you think that goes back to, like you said, kind of that more mental capacity because you're not expending it? Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. For any, you know, is there any resource that you found kind of along the lines outside of the community support to be able to kind of network, or maybe for working moms specifically that you know of that would be, you'd want to kind of pass along, or that was really helpful for you in your journey?
No, I haven't really done much of that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you had a lot on your plate.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. And I think that's another kind of common theme is just as adults, it's really hard to kind of make some of those friends. And especially, you know, if you're not doing them in some of the places that you are naturally at already, that it can be that much more difficult, especially when you're, like you said, adding kind of full day at work, coming home, wanting to be there for as much as you can, that it does make it difficult to kind of have any space for some of those other things. Yeah. Do you think you would have wished for more of that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's an easy, absolutely. What could I have done different? I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
But it's so easy to look back and be like, yeah, I wish I had more motivation, more thought, you know?
Is there any any experience in particular or anything that someone said that's really like stuck with you as kind of a little gem nugget that's been helpful in navigating some of this?
Not really. I don't know. That's a good question. Nothing that I can really think of.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I love and I appreciate you so much for being willing to kind of even talk about the working parent side of things, and even being able to kind of share some of that insight, like you said, that of the different perspectives and how kind of naturally you even found yourself, as you mentioned, kind of maybe going into the standard like movie dad kind of mode, by some of the nature of how things are designed, and that we have, you know, such long work days for many 9-to-5ers, that it then to come home, that there is, you know, a diminished supply by the time you walk through the door, and it makes it difficult.
Yeah.
And so I know that's not something that maybe everyone is willing to kind of share and say. That's very real. And I think it's important to be able to hear that. And so I'm so grateful for you for being willing to share that and chat with me about it.
Of course.
Okay, so now that I've got it just going in the oven.
Yep.
And then what do I do after the oven?
So they want to be like a kind of a firmer consistency when they come out. You can tell if it still jiggles, it's not quite done.
Okay.
And then I believe you want to cool it in the fridge.
Cool. All right.
Or you store it in the fridge, perhaps.
Store in the fridge. Okay. Well, I can do all of those things, and we'll get that going and talk to everybody next time. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you.
I love you. And not just because, you know, you're my brother's sister. It's been a long time in the relationship. So
I couldn't be happier to have you.
Well, I am happy to be here and to have another sister. And my sister-in-law. She's my sister, guys. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk with you next time. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real-life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.